Alright, we've looked at a demand curve. We've seen how it's shaped, why it's shaped that way, and how it changes. Let's take a look at the other side of the equation, the side that most of us are not so used to being on. This is the side of the producer or the supplier or the seller. You've got to think in terms of now of you're operating a business and you're deciding how much of a good you're going to produce. So let's take a look at three possible prices you might receive for your product. Price number one, you can get $9 a piece for whatever it is you're selling. That's a pretty high price, you're thinking. And then you say, well, what would happen if I only got $6 each? And then you might say, what if in fact the price fell to $4? Let's see how these would alter your decision on how much to produce and try to sell. Let's keep that phrase in mind. This is the supply curve. It shows you the quantity supplied at each price. That is the quantity offered for sale. There's no guarantee you're going to sell it, but if you thought you could get this price, this is how much you would be willing to produce. So keep that in mind. $9, let's say that, for example, you said, hey, I would be willing to produce 34 units a day if I could sell them for $9. Now think about that. $9, 34 units. You've got a point out there in space. It's on your supply curve. Okay? Suppose then you said, well, if I could only get $6 a piece for them, what would I do then? Well, I wouldn't be as willing to supply as many. I would only produce 21 units, and that would give me another point out there on that supply curve that says $6, I'll supply 21 units. Why is it I'll supply more of them for $9? Well, first, you hope to make a greater profit, and second, your costs may be going up, and you need that higher price just in order to pay for them. We'll have a lot more to say about costs later in the course. Finally, looking at the fourth price, if you could only get $4 a piece, you might say that's not going to cover a lot of expenses, that's not going to have much profit, I'll only produce 17 units a day. You get your third point on the supply curve. So the supply curve should look very similar to the demand curve, except it's got a positive slope. This is what tends to escape people at first. When the price of something goes up from $4 to $6 to $9, don't think in terms of, oh, I don't like that, I'm a buyer, that's getting expensive. Think of it as a seller. Hey, this is great, I can make more. So think about it. Why did we, the United States, why did we ever build an oil pipeline all the way from Alaska down into the lower 48 states? That was extremely expensive. And the answer is, well, we weren't going to do it until the price of oil went sky high. When the price of oil went sky high, we decided it was worth developing that oil and building the pipeline and shipping it all the way down to the lower 48 states. As the price of oil rose, producers found ways to produce more. Think of that in terms of today's context. There'll be a lot more exploration going. There'll be a lot more creativity going on how can we produce, create, offer for sale more oil. So as an economist, you want to remember, higher prices are mixed. They're kind of a mixed blessing. Higher prices are bad for consumers, but higher prices do wonderful things for sellers. It makes them more creative. It makes them work even harder at producing even more goods. We say higher prices call forth more production. Now, I understand. If you and I are paying $9 a gallon for gasoline, times are not fun. But again, try to turn it around. If you're selling gasoline and you're making $9 a gallon, you can afford to produce quite a bit of gasoline. You can afford to go certain exotic places and find it, more than just under the sea. Maybe you can develop some synthetic gasoline that otherwise would have been too expensive even to research. You're beginning to see higher prices are a tremendous incentive for producers. That's why as economists we want to look at higher prices with 2 points of view. Yeah, they're damaging to consumers, but they are tremendous incentives to sellers. All right, let's go to the next slide. Let's take a look at this supply curve and start moving it around sort of like we did the demand curve. Just like the demand curve, the supply curve can shift to the right. Would that be an increase or decrease? That would be an increase. Anything shifting to the right is an increase. This is an increase in supply. Now, here's a couple of problems. Problem number one, what if you said, oh, supply went up? If you look at the curve and look vertically, that curve didn't go up, it went down. At any point you look at it, it's lower than it was. So we don't want to talk about supply goes up and supply goes down. We want to say supply increases or decreases, supply shifts to the right or shifts to the left. In this case, supply shifted to the right. That's an increase. No ups and downs allowed, okay? Alternatively, if the supply curve shifts to the left, what's that? That's a decrease in supply. Which way did the curve go, up or down? Well, see, if you tell me it went up vertically, you're correct. But if you mean up as more, well, no, there's not more supply, there's less. So S1 to S3 is a decrease in supply or a shift of supply to the left. All right? Keep those straight. One last point in case it helps. If you think about going from S1 at any given price, at that same price, what happened to S2? You now have more offered for sale. An increase in supply, a shift of the curve to the right, means there's more being produced and offered for sale than there used to be. More, an increase. S1 to S2, a shift to the right, is an increase in supply. Let's look at the reasons that would cause a supply curve to shift to the left or to the right. All right? Okay, we've looked at the shifts in the demand curve in the past and the 5 forces that shift the demand curve. Let's do the same thing for the supply curve. You've got to know these just as well, okay? First, we'll talk about things that increase the supply, shift the supply curve to the right. What can cause sellers to be producing more goods at any given price or every given price? Same thing. First, hey, more sellers. If there's more sellers in the market, they're all producing together more output, whatever the price might be. So if there's an increase in the number of sellers, we look to see the supply curve shift to the right. Second, sellers' expectations. Again, this can go either way, but if they have a set of positive expectations that say, hey, we think things are going to be brighter in the future, they start selling more. Third thing, this is the key one, this is the one that's most common, when they can decrease their cost of production. When they can pay their workers less, when they can buy their materials less, when they can pay lower rent, when they can pay lower taxes, anything like that causes an increase in supply. This is the one you want to be very comfortable with. You'll see it frequently. Decrease cost of production, supply curve shifts to the right. Next one, better technology. Basically, better technology generally leads to lower cost of production, so they're very intertwined. Finally, and this one's kind of a hooker, the price of a substitute in production decreases. Now, let me give you an example of that, but we'll do more of it in class. If you're a farmer and you can grow peanuts or you can grow soybeans, those are called substitutes in production. You as the producer can substitute from one to the other. You can put more land into peanuts or more land into soybeans. So, if you're thinking about growing soybeans and you find out that the price of peanuts has really fallen, price of peanuts is very, very low, what's going to happen to your production of soybeans? You're going to produce more of them because you figure you're going to make more money that way. So if the price of a substitute in production, soybeans, falls, decreases, then your supply of soybeans, your production of soybeans, is going to increase. Same for the other farmers. That's a tricky one. We'll go do it a few times in class, but try to understand that through the example, what's going on. Let's turn it around to the other side. What will decrease the supply of a product? Again, the same list in reverse. Fewer sellers. Some of the companies go out of business. Okay. Sellers' expectations. People get negative in their thinking about the future, and they start cutting back. They start hunkering down, saying, "Whoa, things don't look good. Let's just kind of hunker down and wait out the storm." Increase cost of production. If you've got to pay higher wages, or you've got to pay higher prices for your inputs, your raw materials, if your rent goes up, if the cost of running your fleet of vehicles goes up, that means for any quantity you might want to produce, you need a higher price. Listen to that phrase. If the quantity you're going to produce is going to cost more to produce, you're going to want a higher price. If you look at that on a graph, read from the quantity axis up, you're going to want a higher price. Your supply curve is going to shift to the left. Increase costs, decrease in supply. I'm going to put in here a loss of technology. If for some reason you lost some of the technology in your plant, it's typically not a problem. We don't typically talk about technology problems causing decreases in supply. Technology tends to generally improve over time, not deteriorate. And then finally, the last one in reverse. If the price of a substitute in production increases, if the price of peanuts goes up, what's going to happen to your supply of soybeans? Well, better money for peanuts? Hey, let's grow more peanuts. You're going to grow less soybeans, and so is every other farmer. So the supply of soybeans is going to decrease because the price of peanuts has gone up, or they've expected them to. All right? Keep these in mind. You're going to need all of these 5 forces and all of the 5 demand forces to go into the real problems and the real challenge of this first exam.